sometimes you have to do things a little bit out of the ordinary, and this show is being brought to you not live as we usually do. We actually have a guest. This is a pre-recorded, taped edition of the story behind the story. I would like to open the phone lines up in the second hour as we normally do, but because of time constraints, you see, it's hard to do that. My guest tonight, his name is Mr. Dan Winter, just like the time of year it is. Mr. Winter comes to us today doing this recording at his residence in the south of France. Yeah, quite a time gap. So while it's afternoon in his neck of the woods, it's absolutely kind of early morning here for me as we do this recording. So again, I just appreciate Mr. Winter taking the time to do this 2-hour interview. I got to tell you, folks, this is a multifaceted, very complex, really quite complex subject matter we're going to be tackling today. I submit that it's my job as a host to try and make this multifaceted, kind of a deep subject matter into easy to understand terms as much as can be possible. I know it's important to keep you, the listener, on edge. We'll try and do that as far as having your mind expand to possibilities. That's what the show is all about. We bring to you, of course, obtuse ideas that are kind of hidden from view by the mainstream media. That's the whole context and theme, as you know, of the story behind the story. I'll bring Mr. Winter on, but I do have a little bio here that's online on him with a picture. I'll let him explain pretty much what led him into this most fascinating field of study here, involving tonal frequencies. You betcha, absolutely, fractal geometry. There's a lot to be talked about here, folks, and it's like I said, it's a pretty doggone complex, but in a way, it can be a simple subject in reality. You know, looking at his bio just this morning, I got to tell you, Mr. Winter, graduated with honors from the University of Detroit here in the United States. Mr. Winter pursued graduate studies in psychophysiology and, of all things, the origins of language, the etymology of our words, of our language, folks. An interesting subject that's dear to my heart as well. The systems analyst with IBM. So this tells you that he's got a brain on his shoulders, folks. You don't go into systems analysis with IBM without having a pretty good idea of electrical engineering, if nothing else. And metallurgy is all part of his bio. A crystallographer will have him explain that. But we're talking, when you talk about quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and these type of subjects, it's quite easy to get people to scratch their head quickly and say, man, that's pretty deep stuff. I don't know if I can get it. But folks, expand your mind, expand your horizons, ask some tough questions. If you have questions to Mr. Winter, I'm sure he'll give you the information where you can contact him, and I'm sure he'll welcome questions that are relevant and that do make sense. Without any further ado, let me bring on my guest, Mr. Dan Winter, coming us from the beautiful area of southern France. Welcome to the story behind the story, Mr. Winter. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, nice to meet you. Glad to be here. Yes, there is a lot of fun stuff to talk about.
So, if you were, I'd just like to give you as much time as you need to just explain to the listening audience where you came on your life path to come into this field of study. Really, to me, it's the study of the origins, really, of all life, and explaining how this world in which we live operates, not the least of which is gravity. Go ahead and take as much time as you need to explain your journey here, Mr. Winter.
Well, that's great. I'm happy to meet you. Well, my background was electrical engineering. Actually, my father was an electrician. My grandfather was an electrician, and we think electrical. And I was doing electrical engineering at University of Detroit, and then I was invited into the psychophysiology, polygraph design, that sort of thing. We were doing the electrical aspect of of emotion. That was my specialty. In fact, my graduate mentor, Professor Albert Axe, quite famous, one of the inventors of biofeedback, was famous for the first to having been able to electrically discriminate fear and anger. So basically, the electrical nature of emotion was my passion at that point. But then after university, I was hired by IBM, and I became a software engineer for a while and did all kinds of cool stuff. Pretty long story. But physics of consciousness basically was my focus. And that is, I've taught physics of consciousness, physics of feng shui, and physics of spirituality for like 30 years, actually. I'm revealing my age, I suppose. But the thing I was hoping to chat about this evening was, since your background is perhaps related to healing and biology, was the healing plasmas and the nature of healing electric fields, specifically something called bioactivefield.com. That's the website, is bioactivefield.com, in which we review a bunch of bioactive fields and then get to this amazing plasma healing technology we're launching in 3 countries, therify.net. So the actual essence of what is a healing field. A little background there. We often told that story that when they said in the Bible, "I will raise a Shem unto the Lord," and that word Shem became the word altar in church, and then it became the word shaman and schematic and alchemy. The CHEM actually means access to a black hole or implosive charge. And Sitchin spent so long trying to translate that word, he finally decided it means Highward Firestone. And so now we know it actually means fractal field. And that's easy to remember because of the website, fractalfield.com. Basically a centripetal field. And let me give you a specific example. We have designed a centripetal field based on something called phase conjugation. It means implosion for charge. And that is therify.net. It's a cold plasma device. And in that field, we have had hundreds and hundreds of people try it in 3 countries already. And to my knowledge, anyone who has come into that field with pain has left with much less pain, if not no pain. Although I'm sure that won't continue to be true for everybody. But for the most part, we're very successful in pain relief and other things with that bioactive field. And so I'd like to tell you how that was designed. But first, did you have any questions? Did I go too fast?
No, I'm just I'm trying to dissect this, and again, keep in mind, let's when we talk shop as scientists do, we got to try and just give some basic definitions of the terms we use, so that the general public can kind of get a better feel for it. I just want to just caution you or advise you to try and do that as much as possible, because when we start talking about fields like this, it's some people start to think, well, that's kind of like speaking in Greek, and I don't understand Greek. So, yeah, the basic things. I love your introduction. I think that the information is valid based on my personal research over the last 20 years as well. I'm intrigued. I would definitely personally like to experiment with your system. I mean, just ask right off the bat, how much does something like this run a person if you wanted to purchase one, or is it even available to purchase?
They are available to purchase right now. They're $25,000. We're advising them mostly for professionals. In fact, we've installed them only in medical facilities so far in 3 countries, but they are available. They're sold under the legality of what is a sun lamp. A sun lamp increases circulation and reduces pain, and that's what we do. And so the legal requirements to be a sun lamp are not too great, except it's a little pricey sun lamp, but a sun lamp that does all these things. But again, I should explain a bit more. First of all, the device was inspired by a famous guy named Antoine Priory. And Priory in France, decades ago, healed almost every case of cancer that came across, and as well as hundreds of other diseases, as documented by the French government. Probably the most effective cancer cure the planet has ever known. The problem was that no one understood the physics until me, and that's why the French had to give up basically after spending millions. Especially in those times, the electronics was very expensive. But what was not understood, was the frequencies. Priory had been inspired by Lukowski and Wilhelm Reich. Reich. No, they get that right. The Rife microscope, excuse me, but the Rife microscope's frequencies and the Lakhovsky device, which is basically a spark gap, which are very effective, very healing. So this gave Priory some ideas for healing. And again, all this, the literature, hundreds of pages, all the doc, again, at theraphi.net. So you can read all this stuff. And it's clear the French government had the most effective cancer healing device the planet had known, but didn't know how it worked. And therefore, but then I wrote an equation, which is on the cover of my book, that explained what the frequencies are, which is called the origin of all biologic negentropy. And that's at the top of fractalfield.com. So let me first try to do what you said about defining terms. A fractal is something where the inside looks like the outside, to the point where you can zoom in forever, infinite compression, pine cones, ferns, onions. In a fractal, you can zoom in forever. And so it was old news that infinite compression for mathematicians was fractal. But until me, no one knew what a fractal electric field was. And so we claim to have discovered that, and that is what the ancients meant by Hashem unto the Lord, which in their case was age reversal, basically rejuvenation. Now, the first place that time reversal has ever been proven in modern physics is something called phase conjugation in optics. And that is what we're doing, is phase conjugation. Conjugation just means adding and multiplying. And so when you take two lasers and you cause them to meet perfectly opposing, they conjugate phases and they make time reversal and self-organization, well proven in physics and optics. But I discovered phase conjugate magnetics and dielectrics and a few other things. Well, actually, phase conjugate dielectrics was known to some extent with Bearden. But anyway, to make this simple, whenever I say phase conjugation, just simply visualize pine cones kissing noses. You got the image.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that makes a centripetal field. And I can explain how it's centripetal. But how am I doing so far for questions?
I think you're right on point. It's if I'm following it, I think anybody can.
Good. That's the point.
So we talk about fractals. I did a series of shows years ago. I mean, it's been, golly, about a decade and a half, Dan, about the Mandelbrot set. Which is a fractal equation that a simple computer can generate, and that beautiful repeating set, to me. Are you aware of I'm sure you're aware of the Mandelbrot set.
Yeah, of course. Actually, fractals. The top-down view, the geometry of the top-down view is golden mean cubed, golden mean ratio.
Exactly. I was going to say that. But to me, as you look at it from a larger macro view, it looks to me like the image of the golden Buddha, sitting on some type of a pedestal. Are you with me on that?
Well, actually, from the point of view of fractal mathematics, there is no larger macro view because the view repeats infinitely. So
exactly. Well,
there is no zoom in and out because you can zoom in or out forever, and you're always the same.
Yeah. So it's a repeating equation. Now, in the field of entropy and negentropy, I mean, let's define those. I mean, entropy is kind of a confusing subject.
That's the right question. Yeah.
Exactly. Go ahead and define entropy and negentropy.
So entropy just means moving toward disorder or moving toward chaos, obviously. So negentropy means moving toward order. And so it means basically the same thing as self-organization. So when physics discovered self-organization in phase conjugate optics, it was a bit of a shocker that something can self-organize. And then later in phase conjugate dielectrics, the paper on it's called Alice in Barium Titanate Land, because phase conjugate dielectrics self-organize and they appear to know about each other at a distance and be self-aware and pretty magical stuff. And so the reason this happens is the physics that I have documented. And that's what my book claims, that phase conjugation is the cause of all biologic negentropy. It's the cause of gravity, the cause of perception, and the cause of the existence of color. And the advanced physics course we just gave at fractalu.com documents that in some detail. But tonight's conversation is not about the physics so much, except simply it's a background for healing electric fields, unless you wish.
Are you talking about the origins of all color in the visible spectrum rainbow?
I'm saying the reason that color exists is because of phase conjugation. And I'm saying the reason that gravity exists. Because Einstein, unfortunately, never figured out why an object falls to the ground, which is a pretty big problem, because that means you don't know the origin of any centripetal force, and that's a pretty big problem. So once you know the origin of one centripetal force, you know them all. And that's what phase conjugation is. And we have proved it with my book, again, at the top of fractalfield.com. It's simple. There is a wavelength called Planck length and time, which is the musical fundamental of every wave physics has ever measured. It's a musical key signature of matter. And if you multiply that by exact exponents of golden mean ratio, whole number exponents, powers golden mean, you get the radii and dimensions of hydrogen. I wrote the new equation. You get the exact duration of the Earth year and Venus year. You get the exact two frequencies of photosynthesis. You get the almost exact frequencies of the Schumann harmonic cascade and the brainwave frequencies that make bliss, peak perception, and ecstasy. And the term for this in wave theory is called phase conjugate negentropic collapse, basically implosion. Our research group is called Implosion Group. And that creates all self-organization. And that from that equation, you get the physics of the origin of color and photosynthesis. And you get the reason that gravity exists. But I don't know if we want to go into that conversation this evening.
Well, we'll go wherever you want to take us, Dan. This is, I tell you.
Well, in the top-down view of that equation, you have 10 spirals of the golden mean, which I proved newly is the radii of hydrogen. And that is also happens to be the top-down view of every living protein, especially DNA. And the reason is because as the waves approach center, they add and multiply recursively, not just their wavelength, but their phase velocity. The name for that is called conjugation of phases. And that turns only that geometry of compression into acceleration towards center, because when the waves add and multiply their phase velocity, in addition to wavelength, and only golden ratio allows that, that turns compression into acceleration towards center. And acceleration of charge towards center is named the gravity.
Well, obviously, then that would explain the mechanics of aging in a real sense. I mean, because really, entropy is the best discussion, really, of why our bodies seem to disintegrate as we age.
That's right. That's the important thing to point out. Thank you for focusing on what's important here. You see, when the ancients said, "I will raise a Shem unto the Lord," if you study in some of the original language, you realize what they were saying was, we arrived here and started catastrophically aging. We're going to have to fix it. We need age reversal. Well, right now, 500,000 people a year are coming to Bosnia for rejuvenation, age reversal, and they're getting it. And we now understand the physics perfectly, and they've just ordered Therify.net because they know it works. So but remember, time reversal was just proven only in physics and phase conjugate optics. And what they mean by time reversal is interesting. You can take rusted steel and take it back to unrusted, but not the reverse.
Interesting.
Okay, now what that means is that you can only go toward order and not away when you do time reversal. And the name for that term is called negentropy.
Right.
So basically, when they say time reversal and age reversal, they mean the same thing as negentropy in physics, if you understand the physics of phase conjugation. So that gets us back to what we do to stem cells and things like that in Therify, but basically the reason it's a stem cell switch, as well as a seed treatment and a water treatment, is because basically stem cell is called dedifferentiation, which means compression back to the center of the fractal from which the unpacking was self-organizing.
Okay, that leads me to a question. I know the general mix of our audience, Mr. Winter, is there's a lot of people that are shall we say non-Christian believers. There's a good bulk and percentage that are definitely on the field of Bible believers, et cetera, et cetera. Let me ask you this question: how does in your mind, this is a subjective question now, okay? In your mind, how does your theories relate to the concept of an intelligent design creation or lack thereof?
Oh, I definitely believe in a spiritual presence, for sure. In fact, I believe we understand the electrical engineering in great detail of what's called the collective unconscious and the communion of saints. It's basically a phase conjugate fractal field. It enables electrical engineers to design burial grounds and hospitals to make birth and death electrically successful now that we know what it is. So very, very much so. It makes spirituality much deeper and more wonderful. It totally eliminates the need for miracle worship and personality worship, however, which means we can cancel the religion wars, and I think that's a good thing.
Oh, indeed. I just had, It was just interesting yesterday. I had a kind of, I guess you might say, a battle between an organized religion and myself, and it was kind of it was pretty intense, I had to tell you. And I brought up your work. I says I haven't met this gentleman. I'll be talking to him on my radio show and taping it in the morning. This was just last night, and their knee-jerk response was so typical to people of that mindset. Well, it sounds like new age mumbo jumbo.
No,
I
no,
says,
it's
listen,
physics. No, only physics.
that's what I
Physics is
said.
the only
Listen,
thing I do.
I have on my office wall a big, uh, shall we say, painting of Zug's law. People tend to fear what they don't understand, and then that's so true in so many cases with organized religion and all the different schisms and isms
Mm.
and this and that and really, like I've said on the show many times, and Dominic will vouch for this. My mantra is spirituality unites humanity and religions divides them. And so what we're talking about here is basically true base spirituality, would appear.
Well, it's pure science and it's pure self-empowerment. Probably what the fundamentalists fear most is having to take responsibility for themselves. That's the problem. Because once you understand the physics, for example, how to steer tornadoes and how to navigate through death, et cetera, so then the responsibility is all yours. And that's what they fear.
Well, that brings up another point. If this technology is known to you and from your research, I see that this has already been explored in some way to the point of such high technologies. Call them whatever you want. Blocks projects for creating storms, for manipulating the different weather patterns on planet Earth. I see global warming personally, or climate change as we're calling it now, as manipulated by man, not through greenhouse gases.
Well, I mean, the physics is clear that the body Earth is self-regulating. The name for that in physics is called Gaia. It has regulated its temperature and pressure. So obviously, planet Earth has a self-regulating electrical capability. And now we have the physics. The Schumann harmonic cascade is a precise phase conjugate pump wave, golden ratio exponents of Planck, time and length. Therefore, you can fix it. You can make a planet more self-organizing, negentropic. You fix the harmonics of Schumann, you repair the grid, dodecaicosive pent, negentropic implosion, da-da-da. So you can, the fundamental physics is that everything that is not fractal will experience heat during compression. That's the physics. That's what's called the rapture in Christianity. And so the planet should get hotter until we understand what the opposite of heat is. For example, the minute that Schauberger's piezo water vortex began to generate electricity from gravity, called implosion, worked so well, Hitler wrote the check. And you know how he knew it was going to work? When it spontaneously started getting colder. We have the equations, theimploder.com. So we know the cause of heat. And until you understand the cause of gravity, you can't fix it.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that's amazing.
So this is called atmosphere maintenance. There's a whole. It was called planet taming in the book 2/3. But basically, the reason the dolmen, like pyramids in Giza and Cydonia, are at tetrahedral latitudes, you modulate planetary spin relates to phase embed zodiacal spin, and that not only stabilizes gravity but atmosphere and reduces heat.
It's all related. I've always said that, and yeah, I know for a fact it's not because of greenhouse gases. Come on, that's not what's happening.
Childishness. No. The issue is that heat will always be generated when you depart from fractality. And I would like to use the example of pain. Remember, I said that no one that I know of that entered therapy.net with pain, everyone I know of came in with pain, came out with much reduced pain. So what is pain? Well, pain is disorder, heat, that's generated by fractality, which is broken. The proof is, the pain is not a mistake by God, unlike testosterone, according to certain ladies. That's a joke.
That's a good one.
No, but God didn't make a mistake when she invented pain. No, what she had in mind was that pain directs your attention to restore electrical compression. And
exactly.
electric compression is named fractality. In fact, perfect compression is the principle of fractality in essence. So to restore fractality is to restore perfected compression. So what we do is you create this phase conjugate harmonic cascade. And let me give you the example. Elizabeth Rauscher, the planet's most famous physicist probably, and an old friend, she was doing an FDA study on pain elimination. And she tripped over a series of magnetic frequencies by examining the magnetics of a healthy elbow, actually, and fed those magnetics powerfully and did successful pain reduction. Later, when I showed her that my equation predicted the frequencies she used, she agreed that I had invented the concept of phase conjugate magnetics. So we apply that. It turned out that the frequencies that Priory was using were the same. So if you study the equation on the cover of my book, you know the frequencies to eliminate pain, and it works. So you restore compression, you eliminate heat.
Not coincidence. Let me ask you, I have a couple of books that I've read written by Likovsky.
Good.
And so, and my work has been kind of experimenting with. There was my partner and I basically contracted with an electrical engineer to build a plasma generator, call it photon sound beam technology, based on what Likovsky termed his master frequency was 729 hertz. Okay, well I see that's in your equation as well. There in some octave levels. Now let me ask you this: Likovsky said that when you look at frequencies, we're talking about 0.2 hertz being what they call 2 cents, right? That in the human field, he said that they can vary by as much as 0.2 hertz up and down and still get the same effect. Is that accurate? Do you think?
Well, in terms in ratio, of course, 0.2 hertz would be very important if you're subsonic infrasound. But if you're, at gigahertz levels, no. So it's all about ratio, and that's what the sense refers to in octaves. It refers only to ratio. But the point being, and the Likovsky harmonics slide is at theraphi.net. And Likovsky tripped over the correct ratio because he used golden ratio. He learned that from Rife, I think. But at any rate, so he tripped over the correct concept, which is phase conjugate. The thing is, Likovsky devices are useful, and they're famous here in France, and they work. And also, Guy Oblensky has a Likovsky device, and he's even used some noble gas there up in Upper New York, and it works. It just happens to be not quite as powerful as our device. In fact, the Likovsky experts have used our device and agree that our device is similar, except much more powerful and faster. They have to be in there for hours. We take 3 to 5 minutes and achieve much more. But the reason is simple. The physics is something called harmonic inclusiveness predicts vitality. See, doctors know that if they wish to measure how much immune system you have, they measure the harmonics included in your heart rate variability, HRV. And our new app will soon be at heartsring.com for the iPhone for that. So harmonic inclusiveness in medicine predicts how much immune system you have. Well, it turns out we prove now that harmonic inclusiveness predicts how long anything is going to live. Babies, atoms, galaxies, universes, doesn't matter. It's also proven for forests. Incidentally, it's called bioacoustic habitat theory. So the sound of a bulldozer alone can make a forest sick. We know the physics. So the point is that harmonic inclusiveness means the more frequencies in one oscillator, your heart, for example, the longer that's going to live. Now, we did the mathematics, it's called fractalfield.com/mathematics of fusion, to prove that golden ratio is the solution to the problem of how to get the most number of frequencies into one oscillator. And if you then do that with a key signature Planck time and length, you have the equation on the cover of my book. So basically, if you don't take those frequencies and apply them in Theraphi, we take what Likovsky did, the low frequency infrasound stuff, and we add the optical, we add the plasma, which makes the phase conjugation much more broad spectral. And that's why ours is more powerful. Basically, it's a little sun.
I see. Wow. So, I mean, the Schumann resonance 7.83, I've heard other people say it's closer to 8 hertz. How important is that 0.17 measurement?
Well, the equation on my book, the equation on the cover of my book more accurately lists the actual Schumann harmonics as measured. 3 hertz, 7.83, 14.3, and 20.8 are the actual physics, and Greg Braden is wrong to say that they're changing. But anyway, those frequencies, 3, 7.8, 3, 14.3, and 20.8, are within a very narrow bandwidth of the equation, which I call the origin of all biological entropy, which is the actual frequencies that go to all these devices, Prairie and Minkowski, 2.78, 4.5, 7.29, 11.8, and also happen to be the exact frequencies that I have measured for brainwave EEG that cause peak perception, bliss, and ecstasy. So basically, the Schumann harmonic cascade is clear. It's a phase conjugate negentropic pump wave, and it's fixable.
You said a real mouthful there in that sense.
Basically, it's implosion. It's what makes it makes Earth self-organize. It's important.
Exactly. Well, again, folks, listen to this. If your head is spinning, well, that means something is happening with entropy and negentropy in your brain, and that's all. That's what we're after here in this show, Mr. Winters. Maybe I may call you Dan. I think the world, in fact, I know the world for the most part is just suffering from a lack of critical thinkers anymore. We become a herd of programmed, shall we say, robots that have just been so mesmerized by whatever you want to call it, the powers that be, the agenda, that people just quit thinking and questioning anymore for the most part. And when you come out with a radical concept, it's to protect their own paradigm. They start to attack and cause ad hominem. And
hey, what's radical here? I just said the only path out of chaos for anything. Is that radical? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like this guy must be some kind of a nutcase.
No, but we have the proof. Yeah. We have the physics.
Yeah.
None of this is subjective. All of this is solid physics, provable. And by the way, we knew for years ago, you published the physics, the cause of gravity, for example. You published the physics, and every university and government on the planet is going to ignore you. But suddenly you build something that works, and everybody comes to your door. And guess what? Everyone is now coming to our door.
Now, let me ask you this, and if you refuse to answer, I can understand it. It's been my experience when you start finding something that works, like you said, that the entrenched powers that be that really rule this planet behind the scenes seem to want to eliminate that. Whether it's a free energy device, whether it's a healing device that can disfranchise their global model of dependency on certain chemicals. What's your experience so far with that?
It's easy to do the conspiracy theory. And it's true that so many people got sucked in by the medical and pharmaceutical. It's almost as bad as the Catholic Church. But, our approach to that is, we have activities and labs and people in about 8 countries, and everything we do is at least 6 countries. And so, we do everything totally legally, of course, and it's hard to make a new sun lamp illegal in 8 different countries at once. So we're going to be hard to stop.
Well, I like that answer. Listen. Is there a place? And I'm talking to you from Ogden, Utah. My producer here, Dominic, is down in the Bay Area. I can just almost feel Dominic chomping at the proverbial bit, saying, "Where do I go check this out?" Do you have anybody in our neck of the woods that has one of these established?
The first clinical trials are now underway in Belgium, in South France, and we have one that's going in this week just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And we'll have Australia and Canada very soon, but that's what's up right now.
How about the west coast of, or even in the heartland of Utah? Let's get a clinical trial place going here. I want to.
We're happy to. Obviously, $25,000, and we only do it where medical people will be part of it. So that's the starting point right now, and we're doing well in that regard.
So, if I were to get with a coalition of naturopathic, open-minded, even chiropractors that I know, and could I set up a conference call with you with that so we can? I think there's an interest here in my local area to do this.
Sure, absolutely. Not only is implosive plasma a solution to pain and solution to everything, which is the opposite of negentropy, which is obviously solution to cysts in cancer. I mean, we had somebody with a cyst under their arm, couldn't move their arm, and within 3 to 5 minutes had total movement of their arm, similar with people lost in feeling in hands and feet. It's circulation, because circulation is fractality, obviously. So restored circulation is the physics of perfect fractal compression. That's what it is, et cetera, et cetera. So this, and we're improving this. We're now superposing Rife and other frequencies, Ray and X frequencies. So there's a lot happening. It's an evolving field, and we're happy to talk to you. I mean, functionally, what it means is $25,000, and we do a little bit less. We can help if you can show us that you will actually provide clinical results reporting, et cetera. But we're happy to set up new sites, and we're doing this internationally, and we're happy to work with anybody, particularly people that have medical people, because we take the medical laws very seriously. We're not trying to evade any one of them, and we definitely are not trying to claim until we prove it.
Well, I'm just smart enough, I guess, or maybe naive enough, as the case may be, I know enough to be dangerous on this. Okay, I'm not anywhere near your level of expertise, of course, but what I have found in my personal research, my background, I have a doctorate in nutrition, Mr. Winters, and what all that means is, my whole field of study personally is graphing out frequencies of healing minerals. I worked with the late Dr. Linus Pauling. He was my mentor there, and what was amazing to me, I hadn't shared this with anybody, especially Dominic, because I only got on your side just yesterday. And I took enough of your numbers and compared them with my work in healing minerals. And there's an incredible overlap that can only be synchronistic. Okay. It's the same thing, isn't it?
Well, if you start with the radii of hydrogen, which I discovered, our golden ratio times Planck, obviously you're going to get the dimensions of DNA and the Earth orbit and a few other things. So naturally, most things that are centripetal, for example, the only exact two frequencies that cause photosynthesis are bang on my equation. So that tells you something. But, it's funny. Our friend Sal Giandinoto, who was doing this equation for golden ratio in quantum mechanics, had gotten the frequency signature of vitamin C and had vitamin C effect from frequencies only in liquids. Sounds like Linus Pauling would probably have been interested in that.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of some of our discussions is all about frequency at the cellular level, whether it's a nutritional supplement or whether it's a pharmaceutical drug that's chemically produced and it's all about sound and ultimately, which is frequency and light at the cellular nucleus, which is really, again, going back to the DNA helix, isn't it?
Yeah, and we also proved, incidentally, since you're in medical area, you probably know that the frequency signature that regulates cell metabolism is ADP, ATP, adenosine diphosphate triphosphate. It's the common wavelength of basically every cellular energy bond. It turns out that the wavelength of ADP, 1.9 angstroms, is bang on my equation. So adenosine diphosphate triphosphate, the basis of all cell metabolism, phase conjugate, negentropic, implosive pump wave. That's what it is. But I was going to try to give a little information about what it feels like to be in the therified plasma field and what the responses have been, so people get a little sense of it.
Great, please do, yes.
But basically, you're between these. You'll see the pictures at therify.net, but you're between these two plasma fields that light up. And what do you feel? I can tell you that you feel metabolic acceleration. I can tell you that long-term heart rate variability shows heart rate increase, even sustained. I can tell you feel increased circulation, increased metabolism. It is the opposite of sleep. In fact, it's not good for sleep. I can also tell you that a lot of people, perhaps even majority, have some form of bliss experience in it, actually. I can also tell you that almost anybody that sees auras better using it. I can tell you that, having 30 years of Kundalini myself, that it's a Kundalini trigger. I can also tell you that increased metabolism is not always good. But when you put the royal crown on a king, the correct term for that gold is called a phase conjugate dielectric. It accelerates the king's mentation rate. So if the king is thinking shareable thoughts, he will be able to embed better and inhabit his kingdom. However, if that king is angry and his mentation rate speeds up, he will go insane faster. In other words, if you're inhabiting lightning bolts, you need to learn what a shareable wave, I mean a shareable thought, is.
Well, it's kind of like the variable two-edged sword, then, right? There's,
Isn't it?
yeah,
Yes.
it's and that's a law of physics as well, isn't it? There's,
Well, and so we're trying to translate that psychological description into electrical engineering. And remember, I invented the word heart coherence and applied it to heart measurement, and heart math learned from me and learned wrong. But fractalfield.com/coherence. So the history of the study of heart coherence is me. And what I discovered was the mathematics called Cepstrum to measure it. And later it was used as a lie detector by kinesiologists. We replaced the muscle test. So what heart coherence in its climax state is actually phase conjugate. So when you, the old joke was if you use my heart tuner, you could watch. If somebody says, I love you, and their heart coherence goes up, it means they're telling the truth. It's actually a lie detector. So what that proved was that the internal phase coherence of your heart is delimited by the ability to find a wave which is ultimately shareable. A shareable wave, obviously, in physics is called coherence, but internal phase coherence is measured as Cepstrum. That's my discovery. But the climax form of coherence is called fractal or phase conjugate. So basically, when you're dying and you see those four sequence of geometrics that's common to the death experience called the Clevey-Form constants, you're seeing your aura doing the sequence of spin symmetries to do compression. And that embeds you into a fractal or conjugate field called the collective unconscious, the communion of saints, et cetera, et cetera. And to get there, you have to be literally a shareable wave. In practice, it means every thought is pure principle and shareable with everyone. And that's how you inhabit lightning bolts and kundalini and the therapy.
Well, let me ask you this then. If following in the theory of entropy, which is basically order and structure dissolving into chaos. A good example on YouTube is explaining, well, you take a book and rip the pages out, throw them up into the air. The way they fall in haphazard pattern is basically entropy. It's just basically chaos. And what you're describing here then in neg entropy is the opposite of that, having it come back out of chaos into ordered structure once again. If that's the case, now let me ask. This is kind of a philosophical theory here. If everything in the universe, as the universe expands into entropy and chaos, and the Earth itself being a measurable body and with a life force field, okay, what happens to, like, let's say the Earth itself? There's a lot of scientists I've talked with that say, well, the Earth is showing signs of the last final stages of entropy. And that's kind of, to me, I said, well, that's kind of really a downer, negative thinking, isn't it? He said, well, it's science, it's just what it is. We think the Earth is suffering. The climate changes there's a precursor event of a great cataclysmic destruction coming. I've heard that from many sectors, Mr. Winter, and I got to say, Ken, how do you view that type of mindset? Is
Well,
it
first of
accurate?
all, the same physicists who are clueless why an object is falling to the ground are saying that the universe is going to disorder. Look, they don't know the cause of any neg entropy, so of course they don't know the cause of some neg entropy. It's very simple. Look, there's a reason why every wave in the universe agreed on Planck length and time. No physicist can argue with that. Every wave that we've ever looked at. Now, if you take golden ratio exponents of Planck length and time, you get hydrogen dimensions, my new equation. Guess what? That is called neg entropy. So hydrogen is a path out of chaos. It's a little black hole. Now, if you apply the same equation to the frequency of the Schumann harmonics, you get the reason why planet Earth could emerge from chaos. Any system can emerge from chaos and be negentropic if it knows the wave geometry. And hydrogen figured it out, DNA figured it out, and the Earth almost figured it out. And now, of course, we're screwing it up. But if we discover the principle,
That's interesting. I've always said that, and Dr. Pauling told me that many times. He said the key to really all life is studying the hydrogen ion, because that is the basis of all life. Whether it's hydrogen combined with an oxygen molecules,
it's a small black hole.
You have water. You have a water form, don't you?
Yeah. It's also the center bond of every ladder rung of DNA, hydrogen. And so basically, the top-down view of DNA is a dodecahedral ratchet. So you have the short waves of hydrogen bond being actually phase conjugate. Then you apply that with the long phonon geometry of the Bray geometry of DNA, and you have massive broad spectral implosion. So DNA is probably the most negentropic structure in the universe because it's the most broad spectral phase conjugate, which is why you can bend time and space and make gravity and do all kinds of fun stuff with it.
Wow. That brings a whole other dimension to the the Christian religion and the study of just who this historical being Jesus Christ was, and is. I mean, you look at how so many of his recorded miracles had to do with water, and just the thing we're talking about right here, structure of that hydrogen molecule. I've long theorized that's exactly what happened there.
Well, when Sam Lentine, professor of mathematics of State University of New York at Rensselaer Polytechnic, he was blind since birth and never had eye sockets. When he focused the equation for alcohol into water, they measured the water turned into alcohol, water into wine, and we knew the physics.
Yeah, exactly. One of the experiments I did I bounced this off of Pauling. I went up to there's a Irvine, California science park, and I basically took the frequency calculation of an amoeba, and then applied that to hydrogen bonding in medicinal grade pure water over a period of 72 hours, and voila, guess what started growing in that sealed test tube?
Excellent.
Yeah, and so
that's like primal soup.
Yeah, and so it was to me it was like this could be Nobel Prize stuff, right?
Yeah, and when we took the equation for hydrogen, made a vortex cone called the imploder.com, which is the world's most proven agricultural water treatment for increased growth, and now we took the same equation and into the therify.net. And the first time we put a glass of water in the field, the plasma field, the Bovis, which is almost a measurement of the charge field of that water, was off the charts. Now, when Burke and Levengood finished writing the book Seeds of Knowledge, where they proved that Stonehenge and stone circles increase seed germination, they had a high voltage field that increased seed growth typically 30 to 50%, and then they died. Now we believe we have found what the Shem unto the Lord was for, the stone circle, the dolmen. It was an agricultural accelerator, and we think that Therify.net will be the most successful seed treatment electric the planet has ever known.
That's
bioactivefield.com. That's where all those technologies are described. We have bioactive glass, bioactive cement, bioactive water, and bioactive plasma.
I might have to go punch my passport to come to south of France and have a sit down with
also
you.
Bioactive clothing, fractalclothing.net.
Oh, now wait a minute. Fractal clothing as in fabric?
Fractalclothing.net. We also have fractal economics, fractaleconomics.net.
I see.
Fractal clothing is basically when Callahan built the first transducer to measure life force in a tree, he hooked hemp fibers, unbleached, dipped in sea salt or human sweat, to a microwave, actually a nanovolt microvolt preamplifier, which is basically my brainwave device. And he could tell if a tree was alive or dead based on the low frequencies. It's Schumann, But that transducer tells you how to build clothing. Basically, it's the ultimate biologic capacitor. It's called high dielectric. It requires a little background in electrical engineering, but the reason that you need organic material for your clothing in your house is because your aura can breathe efficiently only through high dielectric material, efficient capacitance. Dielectric, you remember you said defined terms. A dielectric refers to the insulator between the plates of capacitors such that you measure the efficiency with which it rings like a bell. So if the dielectric is high enough, it means the bell is ringing with more energy than you hit it with, like pine cones do when they get voltage from gravity. So you use high dielectric materials, your aura can breathe, and your clothing in your house allow your aura to grow. That's why kids in Steiner schools are not allowed to touch synthetics and metal and plastics. No, they're only allowed to touch natural fabrics and wood and stone because your aura can only embed in high dielectric materials.
Wow. Well, my guest today, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Dan Winters coming from the south of France. I told you this was going to be exciting. Is it confusing? Well, yeah, it's confusing if you don't have a basic rudimentary knowledge of science, and really where science meets religion here is what we're talking about. this is stuff, folks, that I think can indeed be world changing and world shocking. I'll go on a limb and say that, Dan. I laud your research. I'm very eager to get a unit. I've got some means. I've got colleagues that I'm sure would be highly interested in this. Would you be willing? Well, I'm sure you would. That's a rhetorical question that introduce you to people that are on the front of researching the Schauberger phenomenon and water structuring. We've had them on this show and in the shows past. I think there's an absolute marriage waiting to happen here with this. It's very, very intriguing to me, sir.
Wonderful.
So
And you have the background. It's good.
so yeah, well, so we got to take a break here and just got just a few minutes left. Go ahead and give us a lead into the next hour. What you want to talk about?
Well, I would like to talk about how we apply these things practically in our lives, from biological architecture, even diet. So once you understand kind of what plasma is.
You have to go back and access the archives. Get that first hour under your belt. This is an incredible topic, folks. Phase conjugation, quantum physics sounds kind of complicated, but in reality, it's not. It's simply, in my opinion, what could possibly be an answer to a lot of the chaos and problems this Earth is facing. It's not New Age mumbo jumbo. It's not hocus pocus, ladies and gentlemen. I submit to you, it's science in action, folks. Again, thank you for your support as listeners of the Story Behind the Story and Revolution Radio as a whole. We can't function without you. You understand that. We welcome your support. We need your support. The station can survive without your donations. If nothing else, donate to the archive access. But again, any and all gifts, as small or as large as they can be, the station greatly appreciates it. And that brings this radio show to you absolutely free of charge. Okay, just about your donations. We need them. We love them. We thank you for your support and your listening ear. Again, a shout out to all the people all over the globe that have sent me emails. Thank you. Right now we have a group of loyal listeners in the land down under. I'm confident this topic matter will be right up their alley, and others around the globe. Thanks again for tuning in. My guest tonight, if you missed the first hour, Mr. Dan Winter from the exotic south of France. Great place to be from. Mr. Winter, thanks again for coming on the air. I apologize, folks, that you don't know this, but this is, again, a tape-recorded show. It's not live. And coming into the second hour, we have had some technical difficulties. Mr. Winters has been very patient so far. Hopefully it continues to be without a hitch. Dan, thanks so much for coming on the show. Welcome to the second hour.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We were trying to put some context around this sense we have of a growing understanding of the science behind spirituality and also science behind life force and negentropy. The key websites were fractalfield.com, and the plasma device is Theraphi, THERAPHI, Theraphi.net, and also all at bioactivefield.com. And we have a wonderful education program on fractal science at fractalu.com. So that's some links in the background. The question we were going to play with in this part of the show was just playfully, since we think we need to understand a deep science behind spirituality in order to answer immediate and pressing fundamental questions in our society, that we try to take the big questions and make them simple. And we were joking about the big question was discovered by Kurt Vonnegut sitting at the bar having the breakfast of champions, which was the whiskey. And he asked, "What are people for?" And he meant it. Well, why do we exist? And I was just going to say, we think we can now begin to answer that question in a meaningful and useful way, even to say what the purpose of consciousness is. We know, for example, that focused human attention causes electric fields to compress. Bill Tiller made that measurement about 11 different ways in his book. Bill Tiller's book was called Conscious Acts of Creation. And so Bill Taylor, a very famous physicist, was clear that focused human attention causes electric fields to compress. That's fundamental information. He was clueless as to why, but at least he knows that it's true. The other thing we know is that it was measured 11 different times that when more than 1 million children sang the same song at the same time, the solar flares were quieted very dramatically, very significantly. This was measured. So we know that the sun apparently does not go to so much trouble to make gene pools like ours for no reason. I submit that what we add that the sun needs is a centripetal force, and that we need to understand that. I would make another example. When advanced Tibetan dies, it's well documented that rainbows happen. It's on films. It's well known. It's proven. So advanced Tibetans die, and rainbows happen. Now, we happen to understand more about the physics of that, too, because if the electrical environment is more conjugate centripetal, that rainbows are more likely. In fact, you can read in my book the physics of why phase conjugation is the reason color and rainbows exist. Basically, when the waves converge in 3D of the donuts called optical photons in a phase conjugate array, they emerge sorted. It's sort of like emerging from a fight in an Irish bar. How's my humor doing?
I'm laughing.
Okay.
I'm chuckling.
Okay. No. Well, no. The idea is that by experimenting with compression in an Irish pub with a big fight. No, I mean when waves get together and they do perfect compression, they emerge sorted. Now, what that means is phase conjugation causes negentropy and self-organization. So, what should we answer to Kurt Vonnegut? Well, we know that at death there is a need for compression. In fact, when Professor Konstantin Korotkov measured, first of all, he measured the number of hours after death it takes the aura to leave the body, and he measured where the plasma aura goes after death. And we know why, because it goes to the place of compression, because it needs to pick up acceleration. We also know that ghosts are measurable by the presence of cooling force, which we...
So anyway, back to my guest, Mr. Dan Winters, comes to us in the south of France, and computer technology is wonderful when it's working, and when it's not, we have a little bit of frustration. We're back online. Without further ado, let's continue on with what we were discussing. What's the purpose of man? What a philosophical question over a breakfast of champions in this case. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, we are trying to understand that from a scientific viewpoint, to really understand science and spirituality, we arrive actually at the issue of what is human bliss or peak experience or euphoria. Because, so many people have a bliss experience when they're in the Therify, this implosive plasma, similar to having bliss experiences in a church, actually. And interestingly, the word Shem unto the Lord was translated to mean altar in the church. It means the altar in the church was basically a similar kind of implosive capacitor. So what is the relationship between human bliss and what we were talking about, that, when advanced saints die, rainbows happen, and when human beings focus, it causes electric fields to compress. What all this means is that there is the very nature of consciousness adds something electrical to its environment, which I call centripetal or negentropic or fractal or implosive. It actually adds order. And so this, we can talk about, the star, our local star, the sun, went to so much work to grow up some DNA. We must be good for something. And we now know, we suspect we do affect how centripetal is our star, the sun. That's actually been measured when millions of people sing the same song or meditate together, for example. So what does this mean practically to you and I in our daily lives? Well, we think we understand the electrical requirement for bliss or peak experience. We know that during bliss, you cohere the vacuum, you implode your environment, and you have your own source of energy. Literally, you're a 0-point energy device during human bliss. From an electrical engineering perspective, until you have a source of bliss, you're a parasite because you can't make your own energy. But also it appears that bliss experience is a turning point in collecting an immune system. And that could be talked about in terms of harmonic inclusiveness. There's a whole story about that. So we've been measuring human bliss peak perception for many years in brainwave science. And Dr. Korotkov pioneered this in Russia with the World Without Blindness project, where young people were being taught to see without their eyes. And it's very possible. And he measured the young people who were successful in seeing without their eyes, and consistently he got brain waves frequencies which were golden mean ratio, particularly the alpha to beta ratio in brain waves, which now we know fits the phase conjugate pump wave of the Schumann harmonics, etc. So basically, during bliss, you have implosion in your brain waves, and the frequency signature is on the cover of my book, like all the important frequencies. And this means that your brain is doing phase conjugate implosion, and that's creating this bliss experience, and that's adding to the centripetal force of your environment. And basically it's a kind of a turning point, and so the science of bliss becomes essential. Now I have a brainwave invention. It's called the Bliss Tuner. You can read about it on the website. And we're developing technologies to do this with breath and the heartbeat and heart rate variability, a new version of heartsring.com. So anyway, you can see that this is relating very closely to what's being talked about in religion.
Yes. Okay. Well, you're right. I see where you're coming from, Daniel. It's very interesting. I'm looking at your website. We've discussed in the prior hour this therapy, whatever you want to call it, like therapy, but PHI, theraphi.com.
Therapy by Phi.
.net is the website. I see these two, shall we say, glowing, almost reddish color, replicating again the Egyptian carving, and this is one of the tombs, the sarcophagi, I believe. I've seen this over the years. It's been an interesting discussion. You see these two very large individuals holding these elongated tubes. You see individuals sitting underneath them that look like they're getting some type of treatment going on there. I was explain what you're, how this thing correlates to what you're doing.
The logo at therapy.net is the famous carving that looks like two light bulbs with the sort of spiral up the center, which, there's the von Däniken says, well, the Egyptians knew how to make light and light bulbs, but actually we think their focus was bioactive fields, which is to say rejuvenation fields. That's basically was the Anunnaki problem, is premature aging. So rejuvenation electric fields were their issue. And actually you can see the little snake-like helix that you see up those plasma tubes in the Egyptian carvings. If actually you look in the plasma in the therapy, you see exactly that, actually. And so what we think is happening is that a rejuvenation field is being created, and this is essential to their aging issue. Because basically, the historic literature suggests that they were accustomed to having electric fields that prevented aging. This is what pyramids were for. This is what Stonehenge was for, et cetera, et cetera. So, anti-aging electric fields, which is to say increased negentropy, increased self-organization, et cetera. And plasma is how you do it with the noble gases, et cetera. So that's why that's the logo at therapy.net.
It's an interesting study because of, I say we, the collective society, really have just a fraction, a fractal, if you will, of the real information that came out of not only Egypt, but right here in America, in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I did a couple of shows on this. On my blog, I documented the incredible, talk about a cover-up story of this underground cave tunnel system at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And make no mistake, folks, I tell you, one of the shows that really created a lot of fuss, a lot of, shall we say, hate mail, a lot of threats to pull the plug on the show was that show. And I have a friend, a colleague in Washington who informed me that much of the, shall we say, the the need for secrecy is there was technology brought out that they really have no idea what it was used for, including what my friend said, a very powerful computer, along with incredible intergalactic star charts. Evidently, there was some type of anti-gravity capabilities that allowed interstellar travel. Now, we can only just imagine why that needs to be kept under wraps. Uh,
Well, clearly the form of propulsion, whether it's the Vimana or the Nazi Bell, we have the equations there at fractalfield.com/propulsion. Basically, you rotate a conjugator, you create lift, and if you know the cause of gravity, well, then you can fix it. But we were getting back to our question about bliss there. I think in the caves, there's somewhere documented in the Grand Canyon caves, there were some of the dolichocephalic skulls, the cone heads, like Tutankhamun,
exactly.
Akhenaten. And we think that's basically evidence of the Hermetic, the Syrian bloodline, et cetera, et cetera. Well, apparently that culture knew how to create a bliss experience, which is what the plasma tubes were about and the Egyptian light bulbs. And, we have a joke. There was a standing ovation in Italy. I was in a church, and I was explaining that the definition of culture was not the color of your wine and your shoe polish and your food. No, the definition of culture is whether you have the skill to teach your young people how to have a bliss experience. And from that definition, in the West, we do not have culture, whereas indigenous peoples did. And they understood the physics, because during bliss experience, you become what is called plasma projective, which is actually a definition of the term shaman. It's also a definition of successful death. And it's a definition of the real meaning of temple, that essentially that if you design a charge reactor like the Amarna Amenti temple, and what Jerusalem used to be, that a group that, say, had learned to lucid dream together, that they could have a collective bliss experience and project their plasma back through the heart of the sun, the heart of the star, which is obviously the only way in and out of here. They called them sun gods in the ancient times. So basically understanding how you navigate your plasma body, which is the real physics of propulsion, is what this spiritual tradition is about. And this gets to politics in several ways. For example, a beehive is not dumb enough to swarm unless there's royal blood. And the reason is because the royal blood is what steers. Well, the same thing is true of people. In a beehive, this was called the body polis. And the body polis is basically the collective cold plasma charge field created by collective bliss. And so literally, from the definition of electrical engineering, there is no politics unless humans are having bliss experience, because they're not creating any coherent plasma that's projectable. And so this is something new to George Bush, that bliss is the function of politics. What this actually means is that we now have the equipment to make political decisions, because you know exactly what you're going to take through death. You predicted whether you can lucid dream and have a coherent aura called your Ka, your boat to the underworld. So the ability to give our children access to that form of what is truly immortality requires them to have a very coherent aura, to feed the aura, the Ka, the Fa Atun is called, to fatten, to feed the aura, and to get a boat into the underworld. So we can make decisions about, that means probably we're going to have to look at the vaccination thing again because it messes with the aura, and metal buildings are bad because it messes with the aura. So basically this is the physics behind what Celestine prophecy said, which was all human interactions about charge, which is to say what actually feeds your aura. Here's an example. You're having an argument with your teenager about them using recreational drugs. And you say, you're getting holes in your aura. But you see, this is now measurable. The GDV bio-well.eu measures the aura, and you can actually see the holes developing, et cetera, et cetera. So you can actually predict from aura coherence. And by the way, Therapy.net enables aura vision. So suddenly we find out what it is that makes you immortal.
Okay.
A coherent, or actually in Egypt, they called it the Ka, your boat to the underworld. The Ka-Ba, the Ba was the part of your aura which could withstand compression to implosion, which actually now we know what it is. It's called a longitudinal wave, sometimes incorrectly called scalar or torsional. That when you phase conjugate, you produce the longitudinal component. For example, when Ingo Swann heated a thermistor at a distance with his mind, he made a flame with his mind, and as the Cherokee and the Bon Po do, and he did it through a Faraday cage. And so now we know the physics because the brainwaves now are phase conjugate, right and left hemisphere, 180 degrees out of phase, making a longitudinal, which is the superluminal component, which will go through about anything. And you reconverge them at a distance. You have the Russian woodpecker and the Luke Skywalker's sword and the Foo Fighters. It's the physics of plasma interferometry. It's the holy grail of fusion, etc. It's all about reconverging longitudinal components, which is the physics of God's mind.
On your website, one of your well, I'm not sure what the exact one is. Bioactivefield.com.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a phone ringing. That's a good one. You made a statement that you kind of state that you need to quote fix the music. Do you want to talk about that for a few minutes?
Could you just say the question again? Say again.
Yeah, when you say we need to fix the music, what are you referring to there?
Well, that's the idea that we know exactly what implosion is by frequency signature, so that actually you can download the software, fractalfield.com/implosion sound. And it basically takes that frequency signature we use for this healing, and it creates a centripetal bliss experience. So actually, fixing the music is about creating the correct frequency signature to enable not just bliss, but attention in general. Again, practical example. When you remove the poisonous fluorescent light from your kid's classroom and install sunlight, you measure a dramatic increase in attention span, the book Health and Light by John Ott. The physics is that the frequencies of the sun is actually harmonics of hydrogen, which are my new equation. And so that creates a centripetal conjugate force, which is a frequency signature. It's a corrected music, and that creates the possibility of attention. And by the way, bliss.
Okay. When you say fix the music, we're talking about the tuning of current hertz frequency, or just
yes, absolutely. Okay. Another practical example: if you look at the bioactive glass at bioactivefield.com, the frequency signature of glass, approximate example is the Myron glass. They're very famous. They create life and growth by a glass whose frequencies are approximately, but not exactly, tuned to the photosynthesis frequencies. But now I have a new equation which predicted which two frequencies exactly perfect photosynthesis, so we can much more actively make bioactive glass, create growth, etc. Also, the bioactive cement uses a dopant inclusion similar to ancient geopolymers to make the cement bioactive, high dielectric barium strontium titanate kind of thing. So basically implosive charge, implosive optics, implosive sound, it's all fits one frequency recipe. Fixed music.
Got it. So yeah, as I'm just scrolling down your website, bioactivefield.com, I notice your GDV, gas discharge visualization pictures, studies. You got to know that golly, this has been back in the late 80s, early 90s. I actually was one of the first ones to bring Korotkov's GDV prototype machines to the U.S. Via Finland. This is back when it was almost impossible to bring anything directly from Soviet Russia. So I have one of the original GDV machines that it's kind of a museum piece now almost. So I understand what you're saying here with that. In talking and working with Konstantin Korotkov over the years, it's an amazing story. Measuring the field of whatever you want to call it, prana, chi, spirit energy upon death is quite an amazing study he performed in.
Yeah, he used ultraviolet and infrared in those cases, but it corresponded. Basically, we've been sponsoring Dr. K around the world too, did a lot of work with him, and he agreed that our biophoton capacitive measure correlated to his Sputnik life force measure. And it started when he was tracking the Kogi to where they made phone calls to ancestors, and he realized you can only do it where the air is fractal, which is to say charge distribution efficiency. And so that possibility defines sacred space ultimately. And when you understand how to measure that, you can predict what capacitive field will cause a seed to grow and define the sacred and decide which architect gets a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what our biological architecture curriculum is, and it's taught in many countries. goldenmean.info/architecture.
Okay, well, let's. I want to just kind of focus. We got about 25, 30 minutes left, maybe. Where do you see the future going with this? I don't know. I don't know your age. Your pictures look like you're probably somewhere maybe in the 60s or 70s. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But let's say you have 20 years. Where do you see this going? Would you like to see it heading?
Well, I think once we understand what a bioactive field is and what causes life electrically, we can reinvent everything from medicine to architecture to hospital design to burial grounds to birthplaces, because we know exactly what is required for living plasma to succeed going through birth and death. And that reinvents a lot of disciplines. It makes us laugh at university departments which claim to be the biology department, and they're located in an aluminum and steel building, which is the opposite of biology electrically. Like, I guess they don't get it. Mm-hmm. So we have three separate ways to measure, to determine which architect should receive a paycheck in biological architecture. When the building is done, you measure the seed germination rate, you measure the capacitance, you measure the life force, and basically determine whether biology is going to thrive in that building. So all this stuff about, sacred geometry and architecture is beautiful, but it's only an introduction to the definition of success, which is basically a bioactive field. And that's kind of where we're going, is reinventing life force. And this is called a hermetic science for one very simple reason. Hermes, the symbol of caduceus in physics, is called phase conjugation.
Indeed.
So this is not new information. It's just information that would then allow electrical engineers to define success for architecture and biology and design of churches, for example, the design of temple. A temple is a design to make a bioactive field that reduces aging. So it's obvious that electrical engineers need to be designing these temples. Now, I know I sound like, if the only thing you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, if the only thing I have is electrical engineering, everything looks electrical. Well, that's true. But, who do you want to listen to? Yeah, some guy like the Pope who killed about 1/3 of the women in Europe, or an electrical engineer tell you the pure principles?
Well, indeed. And, I've long maintained in lectures over the last 20 some odd years, Daniel, and I concur so completely that the body is electrical. We're all this miracle of regeneration of our cells, 70 plus trillion of them, whether they're specialized into brain capacity, brain waves, measuring the electromagnetic charge of brain waves, electroencephalograms. All that, we're standing waves here, folks. If you don't understand that your body is electric, that the very thoughts, the very things you think itself are generated by electricity, then you're really naive. You're missing it completely. From whether it's the advances that Mr. Winters talked about in the first hour about lie detection tests. They're measuring electrical impulses in your biological response to certain questions. Folks, it's what we are. We are electrical in this plane of dimension we call time-space, this earth time. The very definition of time is really a question of measuring entropy and negentropy structures. Am I correct?
Well, mass is defined by charge rotation, which stores the inertia, which defines mass. But also time is defined only by charge rotation, which creates the period we call. And so they both become negentropic when they're phase conjugate, basically. And I like your discussion about we're all electrical. I think our problem in the past was after you get done, with church and somebody says, oh, it's all physics, you say, oh, but that would collapse the richness, it would collapse the beauty. But what we see now is actually the physics increases the beauty and the magnificence and the self-awareness and even the potential for love. For example, we know that you can feel a great deal of spiritual, ecstatic bliss and love, but that this is
delimited by a very specific physics. For example, you cannot sustain bliss in a steel and aluminum building full of dead air and electrosmog. It's a bad idea because during bliss you implode and you suck in your environment. So actually now we know environmentally with good physics of what's required to have a spiritual experience.
Interesting. Yeah, we're on the same page. You referenced John Ott. Just parenthetically, he's a Shertel relative, a great uncle, actually. In fact, we had family reunions here in the Utah where he would come and was invited to give presentations. I was just a wee little lad back then. I was more interested in just going out and riding the amusement park rides and then listening to, well, it was kind of fun to watch his time that he did these films for Walt Disney, as I recall. The time-lapse photography, he pioneered that. But yeah, I've got much of his work on light frequencies and things that you said. So that's my next question to you is simply, okay, what is light? What is light then? Let's define light itself.
Well, Einstein was wrong about the speed limit for light. We're clear on that. Light is a packet of waves of charge, the same way as everything in physics. And, if you say what the ether is made of, it's a wave of charge. Or if you say what plasma is made of, a cloud of charge. The physics world is clear. 99.999% of the universe is called plasma. What they mean by that is the cloud of charge, which when it rotates stores inertia, and then you call it mass. So you really need to say more fundamentally what is charge if light is a slipknot on the wave of charge. And charge is basically the compression and rarefaction of the ether, which behaves like a liquid and it's compressible. And the compression and rarefaction of the ether is called plus and minus charge, which helps you understand yin and yang and all that cool stuff. And so then back to light, then if you understand that photons travel as donuts, as every wave does, then the photon is a torus. And if only the cone of the eye perceives color, well, the physics, that cone is an antenna, can only be used for one thing, to measure phase angle. So color, by definition, is the phase angle or tilt of a photon. And if you read that article, fractalfield.com/fractal photosynthesis, you'll see the physics, the proof of why basically color is simply phase conjugation, convergence of the photon donuts. In short summary, the angle represented by all the primary colors is specifically only platonic tetracubic angles. For example, green, why it's called negative green, is 90-degree angle. And the reason every plant spits out green, called photosynthesis, is because the 90-degree angle cannot phase conjugate it, opposite of distribution, which is why a 90-degree angle is evil in astrology and architecture and feng shui. So the only other two angles that are the photons of all the colors which are not cubic are yellow and blue, which are 117 and 63 degrees, which turn out to be the phase angles of pentodeca, which means the photons phase conjugate by cube dodeca angles, and when they converge in those angles, they're sorted, and that's called color. So there's proof there that phase conjugation is the cause of the existence of color from the physics of light.
Thanks for that. But I bring that up because I've done shows on this topic. There's an incredibly expanding body of evidence. In fact, I'm not sure of the exact years. I've checked my notes, but there were two Nobel Prize awarded in the field of medicine for research on light therapy on what happens with the increase in nitric oxide structures. And golly, you can spend a year each and every day reading 8 hours on the incredible expanding study of light on the human organism, what it does as far as its nitric oxide production. So, would you like to comment on that part of it?
Well, the Therify is effective because we phase conjugate light, and the physics there is quite clear. The noble gases we use are optical phase conjugators, and the reason they're conjugators is because the outer valence electron shells, dodeca e casa, make them a conjugator, just like clathrates in dodeca water symmetry and monoatomics in superconductors like fullerenes and monoatomic gold and carbon.
So interesting. And so I'm just trying to get a handle on some of the what our listeners will be asking me, yeah, through either emails or whatever. I've even had people write me snail mail asking questions. I can almost hear them asking, screaming at me, "What evidence is this that this is completely safe?" You said it's as safe as a sun lamp. Well, yeah, okay. You say in the website there that there's 3 minutes is all you really should have under this lamp.
3 to 5 minutes is typical for our therapies right now. Yes. Mm-hmm.
That seems otherworldly as far as its potential. Uh, quite frankly, it's people are going to be saying, "Really?" There's a lot of I can hear skeptics screaming at me. Why just 3 minutes? Why is that so powerful to do that so quickly?
Because you feel a buzz. We had a shaman in there the other day, and they were quite clear. It was like a stargate open, like a wormhole. So it's and your metabolism speeds up. I mean, we're experimenting, and there's power level adjustments. There's a lot of things you can do, but if you felt it, then I suggest you do feel it. It's like when you're in a very powerful sacred space. Every indigenous tribe knows you don't live there. You go for a short term, and then you're
right. Okay, so basically, let's try and make it easy to understand in layman terms. So you're 3 to 5 minutes between these two lamps that are pulsing a conjugated field of basically putting out donuts of light for best, easy to explain. What happens at the deeply cellular level when you're exposed to that? Could you just kind of give us a real good overview?
Well, you see, there's a description of a theory of cancer there at the top of the site, therify.net, which says that cancer is caused when the high-quality ultraviolet light that drives cell metabolism, which is the climax of nutrition for the cell, when that sex juice, blue fire, builds up at the cell center and has no way out. The same way that kids get promiscuous if you don't give them creative outlets. So in the case of cancer, a spherical membrane is a measure of cancer because it means that the cell is not projecting its plasma. So what we do with it is, so there's no way out for the ultraviolet. So what we do is, by providing a phase conjugate path through center, the high frequencies have a way out for their charge inertia out through the Planck center, which is what phase conjugation is. Basically, restored charge distribution is the opposite of cancer.
And it's kind of safe to say, in my estimation, looking at entropy, cancer is really the cells in entropy, I submit.
Well, the cancer is the cell gone to local distribution instead of to broad horizons of distribution, which means the long wave of charge distribution is broken down and only the short wave survives. So by restoring embedding, restoring broad spectral charge distribution, you eliminate cancer. It's similar to what Albert Szent-György's Nobel-winning book, Electronic Biology and Cancer. He said that the presence of the triplet state electron discriminated cancer from non-cancer. A triplet state electron is basically an electron that has allowed an extended family, which is, he said the way it happened was the water in healthy cells was more orderly than ice, allowing effective charge distribution efficiency. And that order is obviously related to the Clath rates and the conjugation and the superorder that phase conjugate things like Therify offer. So basically, restored embedding into the longer wave, which is, why contact inhibition is how you define cancer. Because if contact does not inhibit replication, that's the only definition we have for cancer. And what that contact does is allows high-frequency ultraviolets to be distributed. So restoring distribution is the opposite of cancer for charge.
And we talked earlier about pain management. One of the biggest things in America these days, the biggest moneymaker for big pharma is opiates for pain management. It's huge. There's even, as much as you watch television over here in America, there's all kinds. There's a plethora of advertisements these days about about how to eliminate the constipation of too much opiates or regulate your bowels. It's absolutely out of control how many people are suffering in America, and I'm saying the world, and for chronic pain. It's staggering. It's
Yeah,
staggering.
and we think once you can electrically define pain, which is charge distribution that broke down because the fractal structure lost compression, that you know exactly what electrical environments reduce pain. And we have been very, very successful with Therify.net. And I mean, I'm not making that claim. You try it for yourself. But so far, I don't know of anybody that came in pain that left with pain right now. But, you know, I'm sure that'll change, but it's amazing.
Let me ask you the next question then. Logically, when you have the pain cessation, when it stops, how long does that typically last before the pain comes back?
Well, it's interesting. We had a doctor in Perpignan, and he had just cut his finger as he walked in the room. We put the plasma tubes close, and immediately the healing, not only the bleeding stopped, but you could visibly see the healing happen. And then he noticed his fingers spontaneously began to get colder, which we explained before. And then a little later, I think it was about 10, 15 minutes later, because he was only there he said, oh, the pain's coming back a little bit. But we had only really just focused on his finger. Then we kind of did his whole body. And then he said, nope, but permanently gone, pain completely gone. So basically, again, it's about restored compression. And I'm not saying we have a solution to all pain. I don't think we do. But I think we have a deep insight into the cause of pain, which is, you know, failure to compress charge well. Because when you compress charge well, obviously you get distribution and you eliminate pain. Because basically, here's what Mother Nature invented pain for. And if Bayer aspirin knew this, they might have to reinvent themselves. But that Mother Nature invented pain for a very specific reason, because it is needed in order to focus the attention that restores charge compression.
Exactly. Exactly. I explained that to my I used to be a very active naturopath myself until our wonderful President Obama changed the licensing structure of naturopaths, and basically I don't meet with patients anymore, or I should call them clients. But yeah, the whole thing I was doing, I was very actively involved, I'm telling you, with working with people that had reached what's called the opiate maximum limit. In other words, they were so much in chronic pain that they just couldn't take any more opiates. It would flat out ruin their liver or kill them. So as a direct result, they were coming to me, and what we were treating them with is a photon light beam structure combined with the it's called Boswellia sacra frankincense from Oman. Okay, the combination of the frankincense with the light therapy would break through, and a lot of their pain would be more effective than opiates. And there was not a buildup charge of the opiate structure with it. So I hear what you're saying. Typically now, when somebody has pain relief from this machine, does it last hours or days, or does it vary by the individual?
You know, I mean, I don't think we should ever claim to have a solution to all pain. No.
Right.
I think in many cases, localized pain, we've had amazing success so far. But clearly, pain is always saying, oh, the structure has broken down and is bleeding charge. And until the structure is restored to negentropy, it should still be painful. And that's a good thing. But gradually, we think we can restore that structure. Obviously, go forth and sin no more. You know, well, okay, we can restore the field and make it more centripetal and trigger some rejuvenation processes. But, you know, there's definitely some lifestyle aspects to this, which I think, you know, the homeopath and naturopath are ideally suited. And that's why we're doing it in clinical and medical environments.
And like you said, or you touched on this, you didn't really say it. And again, keep in mind, I understand we can't make any claims. We don't claim. This is clearly experimental only. I understand that this is a really closely guarded, shall we say, monopoly. But the reality is we got to, what's happening now in the world. I'm talking worldwide now. The current medical model, I submit, is just flat out broken. It's failing people. We're spending incredible amounts of money. I wrote in my edition of my book that I published back in the 80s. I said this current system is simply yeah, it can't be sustainable. You can't continue to go down this road, and it's exactly what's happening. It's talk about entropy. It's like going crazy in chaos.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I think the fundamental there is the notion that if people don't take responsibility for their own health, ultimately, which is to say, you need to take responsibility for your spiritual body, which means, it's not let go and let God. It's understand the physics of what is spiritual and make it happen for yourself inside yourself. And that means, yes, that, people who are afraid of self-empowerment are also afraid to go without health insurance. Maybe I shouldn't make that connection. But the point
that's
being,
true.
the point being that self-empowerment will always be the difference. And let me give you the practical example here. So we're having all this amazing results with Therify.net, the plasma field, and it is effective and it is powerful. And there's a kind of a shaman, a wonderful lady who sees aura here, the partner of our developer here in South France. And she's, every time people get in the Therify, she does this little description of what happened in their aura, and it was really kind of cool. And she tells every one of them, she says, well, we're lighting this tornado and we're imploding and da-da-da, and the Therify is helping you. But you need to go inside and talk to your cells. She tells every one of them that, like, okay, the tornado has sped up, but unless you steer it, so actually it's about self-empowerment still.
Yeah, I just love I do love the fractal studies. I mean, this is patterns that we mentioned in the first hour. The Mandelbrot set. I've done so much digging on that. The ratios of the sacred numbers in that that pattern of life creation that you're showing. Even going back to the Vesica Pisces sacred geometry of the intersecting circles. I mean,
and the reason why the subtitle of my book is Fractal Space-Time, the definition of the cause of gravity and life force, is basically that if you take the Planck length of time, that wavelength times multiples golden ratio, it looks like a caduceus, and that is the only possible 3D wave fractal, stellated dodecaecosa, and that is proof that space and time are fractal for a very specific reason, because it's the only way out of chaos. Specifically, perfected compression is the solution. Einstein said he'd have the solution to his unified field if he understood infinite compression. Of course, nobody told him what a fractal was, not to mention a fractal field.
Okay, my golly, we're out of time. I could talk to you for hours, and why I think I have a sneaking suspicion I will. I'm gonna get with my colleagues, Daniel, and see if we can get a unit here sooner rather than later. I want to do a lot of experiments with it. I have the equipment to measure. I really do, both in water. So
Perfect.
Yeah, let's. I'll get
fun.
with. Yeah, we'll have some fun with it. We're going to wrap up. Again, go ahead and give your primary website out for people that might want to have questions. How can they contact